Hello, Fayette County librarians. My name is Summer Perry, and I am the librarian at Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you my adventures in browser-friendly shelving, and it is just another term that I use for dynamic shelving. So I hope you enjoy and learn a little bit from my experience. So, first of all, I prefer the term browser friendly shelving versus the term dynamic shelving. Kelsey Bogan in her blog used that versus static shelving to kind of describe a more interactive way of displaying books. And I think that's great, but I think browser friendly is more specific as to what we are trying to accomplish with this type of shelving. So I just refer to it as that, just to make it very clear on what I'm intending. I do know that it's basically all semantics, so feel free to call it whatever you prefer. But I just find that it better fits the concept of what I am going for. I am making sure that my students have something a little bit more eye catching to browse on my shelves. I added a pop of color and I have added hopefully a little bit more interest and a little bit of ease in looking around my shelves here at Dunbar. So that is what I was going for with this particular type of shelving. So, why would a librarian want to use browser friendly shelving? Well, first of all, definitely visual interest. It's much more interesting to see outward facing books and look at covers of books rather than just the sides or the spines and the spine labels. It is also, in its way, a form of reader's advisory. So, students can see the books that are facing outward, and those are getting checked out more than books that are straight on the shelf. And what I have noticed is that because students are visual many times, they see that and they want to pick it up and they go ahead and check that out. Also, as you look around the library, it provides a lot more engagement for students. So you're seeing a lot more books that are outward facing, not exactly like a bookstore would do, but a little bit more like a bookstore. Paul Lawrence Dunbar is genrefied already. So now I have some of the more popular books or the books with more eye catching covers facing outward, and that is gathering a lot of student interest. So I kept my particular dynamic shelving very low budget. I know that many people do wallpaper or other kind of bright paper on the back of the shelving. Instead, I decided that I wanted to be a little bit more low budget and temporary in case I ever wanted to change it. So I used masking tape. And I got it, as you can see, in all the colors. Some of it I got through Office Depot and a purchase order. Some of it I went ahead and spent out of pocket through Amazon to get the colors that I wanted. But I kind of planned out what colors I was going to want. And then I eventually ended up buying more book easels, but I started out with the book easels that I currently have and some of the bookends that I currently had. So for my process, I did not do the color paper on the back of the shelves. I know that would have been a nice pop of color. However, that would have required taking down basically all the books on that shelf, putting the wallpaper up or color paper, and then putting all the books back. And that's time that I did not have. So because of my time limitations, here were the steps of my process. So first of all, I started with genres already. I was already there. So I decided on what colors should go with what genre. For example, you can see here in the picture that I chose black for horror. And then I did some caution tape for my mystery section and then completed that with regular yellow tape. So I basically chose different colors. So now the library has a little bit of a pop of color at each genre. I then started focusing on series and multiples. So with the series books, I went ahead and put number one in the series as outward facing, and I put the other ones behind. I did this for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't have a lot of expansion room, so I needed my books to kind of stay in within the shelf that they were already in. Doing this actually helped highlight the series and display the cover, and then gave more clarity for students who want to look at what I have in that particular series. Now, at Dunbar, you can see the red numbers in the upper part of the spine. We go ahead and number them that way in color code so that we kind of have a system going on, but it just helped make it more clear. Then I focused on books that I had multiple copies of. In this case, you can see I actually have like 5 copies of The Help, but some of it's gotten checked out because it has been on display and featured. So I stacked multiples by putting one as outward facing and then all of the other multiples in the back. There's a couple of ways to do this. These were laying on their side. You could also do them propped up, but also outward facing. I did use a bookend here so it would support that top one and have it showing out again for the aesthetics. And then finally, for other outward facing, I chose student favorites. This Kira Cass, the selection happens to be a favorite series, so I chose her as a favorite author and highlighted her newest series at the end of this particular shelf. I also, instead of having all of my bookcases left justified, if you will, I made some of them right justified, and I had some of them gather in the middle. So I kind of switched up the interest as far as where the books were. Now, you will see that there are still plenty of books that are just vertically on the shelves, and that had to be, again, I ran out of space and I was not able to expand. So I still had plenty of books that are traditionally shelved as a library would, but I made sure to have some of those outward facing books for interest. So then you can see in my before picture, I didn't take it immediately before I had started taping. But my before picture, it was just regular shelves. I had started taping with the green over there on the left. But in my after, this is my historical fiction section. And you're going to see that now it's got a pop of color at the top. I also put the color there with my shelf label of historical. So now I can tell students if they're looking for a certain type of book, I can say, go look in the green section, or my fantasy is purple. And that's a lot easier than directing them just with a hand gesture or across the library. And you can also see that I still have traditional shelves of books as you would in a library, but now I have some of that outward facing and I have some more visual interest going on with this particular section. So, for my final thoughts on this, call it whatever you want to. If you're like me and you don't prefer dynamic shelving, I just, again, called it browser friendly shelving. I made it work for my library and my students and my budget. And I would encourage you to look at those things first. You know how your students browse more than anyone does. And so you kind of know what's going to work best for them. I made this work for my budget by keeping it simple and for my time constraints over the summer. I knew I wasn't going to be able to wallpaper everything, so I went ahead with the color masking tape. And for me, that was just enough of a pop of color that I needed for a high school library. For an elementary library, you may want a larger pop of color. So again, you know your crowd, and you know your students and your patrons to know what's going to work for them. And then finally, you have to stay within your budget. I did end up buying 100 more book easels. And what I found was that was not nearly enough. So I added another 200 to that. So I ended up buying 300 extra book easels so I could get more outward facing books. So whatever works for you and your budget is how you need to go about this particular process. I thank you for listening, and I wanted to show that I got this on Slide Carnival, and there's a couple of different ways that you can get that, but I really like the pop that it provides to a nice slide deck. And thank you for listening.